Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Tell Your Story. I'm Todd Nesloney, elementary school principal in Navasota, Texas, as well as author of the book Stories from Web that this entire series is based after. My whole goal with the Tell Your Story series is to find people with stories that have inspired me and people that have encouraged and inspired me. And I'm so thrilled this week to introduce you to my guest, Maria Flores-Guerra. So, Maria, thank you so much for being here. Go ahead and introduce yourself for everybody listening or watching.
I'm super excited. Again, I am Maria Flores-Guerra. I'm a principal at Evangelina Garza STEM Elementary at La Joya ISD deep in South Texas.
And I met Maria at TEPSA this summer, and she was at several of my sessions, and we got to talk a little bit. And Maria shared a little bit of her story with me, and I've been able to keep up with her kind of online through some things. And I'm so thrilled that you have chosen to come on and kind of chat a little bit. So thank you so much, just from the top of the show, Maria, just for coming on. I appreciate you.
I'm super excited and I'm so glad to hear and see that you have this forum because many of us educators have stories to tell and that we should share. We shouldn't hold them back to ourselves because we never know who we might inspire, or we might be able to say, you know what, I had that experience happen to me. I'm not all there out there by myself.
Exactly. So, Maria, when we were at TEPSA, I shared the story of my mother and kind of the impact she had on me and how her life has affected my life. And after me sharing that, you actually came up to me and shared a story about your mother as well. Can you kind of share with our listeners here that story?
I sure will. My family is an immigrant family to this country from Mexico. And I started school quite some moons ago. And when I did, there was no bilingual education. This was years before bilingual education would ever come into fruition. And I started kinder. I was old enough at the time to start kinder, not young enough to start pre-K. And so my year progressed like any other typical student, except for the fact that I had no one at home to help me with the acquisition of the English language. So when I went into school, it was sink or swim. Well, there were many words that I did not understand, not to say the majority of them. And my teacher didn't understand me. I went home crying one day, and my mom asked me, "What happened? Why are you crying?" Well, I had to find the courage to tell her, "Mom, I didn't understand the teacher, and she got angry with me, and she pulled my hair." So I thought about that for a long time now as an adult and thinking as an educator, the impact that makes. But more than importantly than anything, I love the fact that my mom, in spite of the fact that she spoke no English either, made her way to the school the next day, demanded to speak to someone who did speak Spanish and could understand her, and championed for me the fact that the way I was treated should not be a way any child is treated, especially when you're 4 or 5 when you're in kinder. So I really thank my mom for having done that. And so she's always showed me to make sure that you go out and fight for the underdog and you be their voice piece so that that doesn't happen to them. And years later, I go back and I think, I wonder if that wasn't the first little seed that was planted in my heart to say, one day you need to be an educator too.
And I think that's so powerful that you can look at all that you've done in your life and in your career and still remember this incident in kindergarten that just affected you so deeply that it's still a part of your memory. And that just reminds me of the impact we have on kids, regardless of their age, with the things that we say and the things that we do.
Exactly. We model to our kids all the time with, more importantly, I think the things than we do than what we say. We think they're not watching, but they're watching us all the time.
And I think you bring up a really good point too. Sometimes when we have kids who come from a monolingual or multilingual background and they come into a school where the other children don't speak their language, not only are they trying to learn the language to keep up, but also they go home and just like you said, if their parents don't speak English in this case, then they can't even help either with some of the work. And so growing up, through your years in education, how did you find a way to balance all of that where you knew your mom at home couldn't necessarily help you with some of the English, but you also had to try to keep up and not feel so left out? How did that progress with you as you grew older?
As I grew older, I was very fortunate and very blessed to have teachers that understood where I was coming from, that knew that at home I didn't have the language support, but I did have the support of a mom who made sure that as soon as my siblings and I got home, there was some kind of lunch or a little snack on the table ready for us to eat, but also to make sure that we sat down and did our homework before anything else. So throughout my elementary, my junior high, and even high school years, my mom always made sure that we first did our homework before we got to go outside and play and enjoy in the activities that all the kids were doing. Because in her mind, she knew the only way that her kids were going to make it in this great country was through education, in spite of the fact that my mom never stepped one day of her life in a classroom herself. She was unfortunately a child of divorce back in the 1940s when it was taboo, especially in Mexico. And she and her siblings weren't able to go to school. But no one will cheat my mother out of a dime, and no one will ever pull the wool over her eyes. She's a woman who's very, very strong, very, very capable of carrying herself well.
Have you had the opportunity to sit with your mom and talk about what it was like sending you to school in another country, and if that was scary for her or maybe exciting because she was giving you the opportunity she necessarily didn't have?
Well, I know she's told my siblings and I that she was always excited, that she knew that America was the land of an opportunity and that we came to be able to take part of the American dream. But we knew that we had to work hard for whatever we wanted. And that's what she instilled in us, making sure that every step of the way we always did the best that we could. So she was very excited to see that her kids were making their way in this great country. And
Now,
so I share my story with my kiddos and tell them, guys, I'm from Mexico with parents who weren't schooled, with a mom and dad who instilled the value of education in us at a very young age. If
you know,
we made it, you can too.
and I think that's perfect. That's what I was going to ask was, now that you are working with kids and you have for years now, but now you're a principal of a school too, how do you utilize your story to really connect with families and make them feel welcome coming in if you are also working with parents who did have an education growing up?
I do share my mom's story with my parents. I think now my mom might have the opportunity now to visit from time to time. Unfortunately, I lost my dad a little over a year ago, and she was taking care of him for several years. But now she's just barely getting her bearings, and I do want to bring her into the school so that parents get to hear her, having grown up or having brought up kids in the late 60s and the early 70s when parents weren't always allowed on campus. She made her way into the school and made sure that teachers knew she was there for us, even if she couldn't necessarily help us with the reading and the writing, but she made sure that we did our homework. So I share that story with my parents at the campus, and I share my story with them as well. And I remind them that just like my mom wanted this great opportunity for her children, I know that that's the same thing they want for their children. So it works out for both of us. And I do share with them, I know what it is to grow up in a country that's not your home country. I know what it is to suffer the not having sometimes bare necessities, but still making it through.
So, what is the population of your campus?
I have 100% students who are Mexican American.
Mhm.
I have 98% students who are low economic social status. I have around 85% second language learners.
And you're based in Texas, just like I am. That's why we met at the Texas
Yes.
Principal Conference. And a story that I shared a couple episodes ago with another educator was, with all this conversation over the last 2 years or so about the wall and about ICE and about deportations and things like that, I've sensed in my community, which is about 50% Hispanic, just a fear that percolates and begins to not only affect the families and the way they get involved with school because they're not sure if they can trust that entity, but also what the kids are bringing to school. Being at a school where 100% of your students are Latino, do you see that even more prevalent in the conversations and what's happening?
Yes, and I'll tell you, when we had the change in presidencies, we saw it most. And we did have parents that were staying away from the school. And if they needed anything, they knew we were a phone call away. And my parents know that I operate our Facebook page. So they send me messages through Facebook. And so we kept in contact through that medium. But yes, they were in the beginning a little hesitant to go out and to the schools or anywhere else to get the assistance that they needed. Over time, they've been able to feel a lot more comfortable. And fortunately, this year we've had more parental involvement than ever before, which I'm super excited about.
That is wonderful. So how do you feel is the best way that you're able to support kids at your school?
We are doing a lot of different things through reading. We are in our first year of being a STEM campus. So we're trying to do as many activities with them, challenging them with the technology, the science, the engineering, the mathematics through activities throughout the week. In the evenings, we've had quite a few curriculum nights. We had so many parents, many, many more than we've had in previous years. And so we support them as much as we can. One of the things I started this year, because we are a high poverty area. And I know that books aren't always the first thing on a parent's list of things to get our kids when we're worried about making sure they make ends meet and have a warm meal on their table. So I picked up this idea. I'm not sure if it was from you, but I think that it was. We do a daily oral read aloud on Facebook for our kids. We post it between 6 and 7, and I've seen a lot of principals take over, but I know that it's not my school, it's our school. So my entire staff has come on board, and different people are reading different stories Monday through Friday, giving the kids an opportunity to have a story read aloud to them before they go to bed.
Oh, I love that. What kind of feedback have you received from the students by doing something like that?
The students love it. And when I go into their classrooms to visit, they're like, I saw you on Facebook yesterday. I really like the story. And so I asked them, tell me, which story you'd like me to read, and I'll be more than glad to share it. If not, ask your teacher to read it for us, and we can share your favorite story with your favorite person here on campus.
Yeah, I love it. I do a Sunday night bedtime story for our students, and it's so funny on Mondays because they'll either be like, I saw you on Facebook, or some of them don't even understand that it's Facebook. So they're like, I saw you on my mom's phone, or I saw you on our computer. And I'm like, what? And then I'm like, oh, wait, yeah, I was reading a story, right? And they said, yes. I'm like, okay, good. I didn't know what you meant. You saw me on your mom's phone. So I know that the kids just love that anytime they can experience anybody from a school outside of school hours, they find
Yeah.
it so cool in the elementary level.
Yes, like when you run into them at Walmart or HEB.
Uh-huh.
You're actually a person and you shop? You should.
Exactly. So, we're in the middle of Hispanic Heritage Month as well. How does your school take the time to celebrate Hispanic Heritage Month?
We had a couple of reading activities. I'm trying to remember if it was last week or the week before that, where we invited parents in. We read a couple of books that show our heritage to the kids. We had several games with the parents, and the kids came out to play with them and read with their parents. We had an event for the lower grades and an event for the upper grades so that all their kids got equal access to their moms and dads. So we're really super thrilled that we had probably around 200 parents in attendance each day. So it was
That was
really, really
during the school
great.
day?
Yes, it was during the school day because we wanted to have them come and read with their kids at the school. So that was
I
exciting.
love that.
And so we'll have little days where the teachers are reading books to the kids. We have our little typical dress up day, and the kids love that because it's a day they don't have to wear a uniform. So they enjoy
Ah.
that part. I had one little boy whose mom bought him a little charro outfit, and he was asking, can I please wear this all week? So I told him, sure, go ahead, wear it all week.
I love that so much. So, when you've been in education for a few years now, when you think about education and the state of education, what do you think is one of the biggest challenges facing education today?
I think many times we're not allowed to do as much as we'd like to in terms of having bigger celebrations. Right now that we're a STEM school, I would love for us to be able to do a lot more activities and a lot more hands-on learning uh, than we're having the opportunity to because of the high stakes testing that we have. And I hate to say that word, but it's part of our reality. And I think it's just a measure of one day in the life of our kids when they come to us 180 days. And we are able to see the great growth they have. But on that one day, it doesn't always show.
Right.
So I think that for us, that high stakes testing has somewhat diminished a little tiny bit of the creativity that we could possibly have would we not have that.
I couldn't agree more. And and sometimes I think about too with the stories of my own students, and that one day of testing. It's like when you have kids that come from volatile backgrounds or low socioeconomic status, they could have had some terrible event happen that morning, or not had food for the last 3 days and we didn't know about it, and all these things play into that one day you're judged on. So I think you're totally right that sometimes that does suck the creativity out of what could be happening in a school so that we can try to maintain what the state wants us to maintain.
Exactly. And other than that, I think we have the opportunities to build the schools that we want, find spaces of time during the day where we say, you know what, we're going to go ahead and safeguard this time, and this is what we're going to be doing today.
Mhm.
Even though sometimes it doesn't focus on the four areas, because I think our job is to educate the total child. Their intelligence is obviously the biggest piece,
Mhm.
but we also have to take care of their emotional intelligence and making them know that they're part of a greater uh, society. And yes, they need to know how to read, how to write, and do arithmetic, but they also need to know how to interact with one another.
I couldn't agree more. And you and I talked a little bit before the show. You said, I think my husband's getting a little mad at you, Todd, because when I spoke and I talked about just that power of books and getting books in the hands of kids. And you shared with me that even you, like many principals, you go out and find the half price bookstore and other books, and
Yes,
you spend your own money
yes,
buying books. And people who aren't in education, I mean, for educators, I know I'm preaching to the choir. I know they all know how much money they spend out of their own pocket.
yes.
But people who aren't in education, they don't realize how much money that we put into our kids and back into our school that we never ask for any kind of reward for. We never do any of that. But why do you feel it's so important to get access to books in the hands of kids?
When you look at the big picture, whether you're speaking about science or speaking about social studies or even arithmetic, reading permeates every other area. And so when we teach our kids to have a love of reading through books that are our favorites and we make them come to life, I think we're doing what we need to do. Our kids don't always have books readily accessible at home. I think about me growing up. My mom made this huge investment in buying us the world encyclopedias, and then those little books, and I don't remember what they were called, but some of them had green spines, some of them had blue spines, and they were all the different little colors, and they had all the classics within the book. So she would make sure that she had those kind of books for us. And I remember they would come and collect once a week, and she'd have her $1 or $2 ready to give as her payment for those books. And so it was easier to make the sacrifice back then.
Mhm.
I think we didn't ask for the Xbox. We didn't ask for all these things because they just simply weren't around. So she did that. I don't see that happening in our communities anymore, where we have the salesman going out to sell the world book encyclopedias. And so the biggest access they have to books in their life are with us at the campus. So if I lose books throughout the year, I know I have quite a few teachers that do the same thing. For us, it's no big deal because it's going into the hands of a child who's going to be readily reading them.
Yep. What is one of your favorite books to share with a kid?
I have so many that I can't tell you. I can
I was
pick
gonna say, I know that's probably a really hard question, like pick your favorite child kind of thing, but
my favorite childhood book that I remember, and that's because Miss Sutherfield, who was one of my teachers from Little Rock, Arkansas, read to us from the mixed up files of Mrs. Basely Frankenweiler. That is my absolute favorite book. And as I went to New York and visited like 10 years ago, I was going through the museums and I was thinking, oh my God, this is where they were. And mind you, I was already 40. And so just to see that and be able to look at that and think about how fondly I would look forward to Miss Sutterfield reading us the next chapter every day. And just seeing all of my friends in our eyes thinking, oh, wow, what would it be like in that museum? Would we be able to spend the night? Would they catch us?
I
And so
love
that's one
that
of my
so
favorite
much.
books. And the
That
other one that I sent that I love and I have read with my kids in the past is Where the Red Fern Grows. Oh, I cry every year.
yes. You know, I love the way you share those and the memory you have attached of even years later and going to the museum and remembering that book. You know, I can think of childhood books like that too, where it's like they're so stuck in my heart and in my head that these things bring up the memories and I want to go pick it up. And then it's just like I've talked about in other places. When you fall in love with the book, you have to talk about it. And so
Yes.
it's so easy to talk about it with kids and find a book that they're passionate about and bring that into them.
This summer I read I'm Not Your Typical Mexican Daughter, and that was one of the books you recommended. And as I'm reading, I'm like, oh, God, I had that happen. Oh my God, I had that happen. So I love the fact that we're reflected as Hispanics in so many new books now. And so I try to bring that type of book to the campus so that the kids see, maybe being an author is in your future.
You know, and I love that you bring up that book because I recommended it to several of my staff over the summer as well, and they were like, "Oh my gosh!" Just like you said, they were like, because they're both of the ladies who I'm recommending it to are both Latinas, and they both were like, "Oh my gosh, that was my family. That's exactly what they would have done. That's what my mom would have said. That's what my dad would have done." And they were like, "I
Yeah.
felt like I could finally see myself in a book."
That's exactly how I felt. I don't know if you noticed that I took it with myself to read over the couple of days we went to the island, and I was so into the book. I sunburned half my body because I didn't realize I was out in the sun. I was so engrossed in my book.
I love it. I love that so much. Well, Maria, for our last question, if you were to leave one piece of advice for people who may be listening or watching, what would be the one piece of advice you would leave for them?
Keep reading because we are the best advocates for books for our kids. Try to figure out what your kids like and make sure you pick up a book now and then that will address what they like so that you can be knowledgeable and say, hey, there's this new book out. You might want to read it. Have you tried this series? I love historical fiction, and I think it's because of my son. I think we read every single book of the Magic Tree House, and so we traveled all over. And so when we travel out, my son will remember a book. Oh, hey, we saw that in this book. Or hey, we read it in this other story. And so I've learned to love historical fiction as well. So I recommend a lot of those books to my kiddos. I also love Junie B. Jones. And so my favorite book is Turkeys I've Loved and Eaten. And so I share that one all the time. And my first graders come to ask me, what do you recommend? So I recommend that series to them. And I tell them that's my favorite book.
Huh. I love
So I
it.
think that to make sure you always keep reading, whether you're a young educator, someone a little more seasoned like myself, keep yourself current with what's out there.
I love it. Well, Maria, I can't tell you thank you enough. You know, I've loved getting to talk with you in person and getting to hear some more of your story here tonight. So thank you for sharing some time and being brave enough to come out here and share a piece of that for the world at large. So I appreciate you, Maria, and thank you so much.
And thank you for allowing me to share my story. It's meant a lot, and continued successes to you.
Thank you. And for those of you listening and watching, thank you again for joining us on another episode of Tell Your Story. We've got new episodes coming every single week, so make sure you either watch them here on Facebook, check them out on YouTube, or subscribe on iTunes or SoundCloud for all the episodes. Everybody, have a great night.